Welcome to AppleKnows channel. I am Apple, and today I want to take you on a journey through discoveries that changed the world by pure accident. These are not myths, not legends, but real stories that sound so unlikely you might think they were made up. Yet history is full of strange twists, and the most powerful innovations sometimes come from the moments nobody planned. Imagine this. It is the year 1928, and a scientist named Alexander Fleming leaves his lab a little messy before going on vacation. When he returns, he notices something odd. A mold had contaminated one of his petri dishes, but instead of ruining his experiment, it killed the bacteria around it. That mold would later become penicillin, the first true antibiotic, which has saved hundreds of millions of lives. It was not a planned discovery, but a mistake that changed medicine forever. Now picture a scientist in 1945, Percy Spencer. He was working on radar equipment and happened to stand in front of a magnetron, the device that powers radar. In his pocket was a chocolate bar, and it began to melt. Curious, he experimented further and realized microwaves could cook food. From an accident in a military lab came the invention of the microwave oven, now in nearly every kitchen around the world. Even something as ordinary as your morning drink can trace its origin to accident. Legend says coffee was discovered when an Ethiopian goat herder named Kaldi noticed his goats became unusually energetic after eating red berries from a certain bush. He tried them himself, felt a strange rush, and the rest is history. What began as curious goats turned into one of the most consumed beverages on earth, fueling economies and societies for centuries. Then there is the story of Post-it notes. A researcher at 3M in 1968, Spencer Silver, was trying to invent a super strong adhesive. Instead, he created one that barely stuck at all. At first, it looked like a failure. But another scientist realized that this weak adhesive could be used to create small sticky notes that could be applied and removed without damage. That so-called failure became one of the most successful office products in the world. But here is where it gets even stranger. The discovery of vulcanized rubber, the material that made durable tires possible, came when Charles Goodyear accidentally dropped rubber mixed with sulfur onto a hot stove. Instead of melting into useless goo, it became tough and flexible. This accident gave rise to modern transportation and industries that depended on rubber. Even foods that we treat as ordinary come from chance. Potato chips, for instance, were invented because of a complaint. In 1853, a customer at a restaurant in New York kept sending back his fried potatoes, saying they were too thick. Frustrated, the chef George Crumb sliced the potatoes razor thin, fried them until crisp, and salted them heavily. Instead of being angry, the customer loved them. That mistake created one of the most popular snacks ever. And speaking of unexpected moments, think about how X-rays were discovered. Wilhelm Conrad Röntgen in 1895 was experimenting with cathode rays when he noticed a fluorescent screen glowing across the room, even though it was shielded. He realized some invisible rays were passing through objects and creating images. Within weeks, doctors were already using this accidental finding to look inside the human body. From life-saving medicine to the snacks we eat at night, so much of our world comes not from careful planning but from chaos, mistakes, and curiosity. The pattern is always the same: a sharp eye, a strange event, and the courage to see possibility in the unexpected. Take champagne for example. In the 1600s, French winemakers in the Champagne region were actually trying to prevent bubbles in their wine. Fermentation in cold weather stopped early and then restarted in spring, producing unexpected fizz. At first, the winemakers thought this was a flaw. But a monk named Dom Perignon embraced the sparkling accident, refined it, and gave birth to the drink now linked with luxury and celebration. Or consider super glue. In 1942, a scientist named Harry Coover was working on materials for gun sights during World War II. One substance he tested was incredibly sticky, so much so that it ruined his equipment. At the time, it was considered useless. Years later, he realized this so-called failure could be marketed as an adhesive like no other. That mistake became one of the strongest and most useful glues in the world. Then there is saccharin, one of the earliest artificial sweeteners. In 1879, a chemist named Konstantin Fallberg was studying coal tar derivatives. He went home, forgot to wash his hands, and while eating dinner noticed everything tasted unusually sweet. Instead of being horrified, he traced it back to his lab work. That strange oversight brought saccharin to the world, and it would go on to reshape the food industry. Some accidents were not just sweet but also revolutionary. In 1839, photography took a leap forward when Louis Daguerre discovered that a plate coated with silver iodide became permanently imprinted when exposed to light and mercury vapor. The discovery came only after a storage accident when a chemical container leaked in his lab. From that uncontrolled event, the birth of photography emerged, changing how humanity remembers history. Even something as playful as popsicles came from chance. In 1905, an 11-year-old boy named Frank Epperson left a cup of soda powder and water outside overnight with a stirring stick still inside. The liquid froze, and by morning he pulled out the first frozen treat on a stick. That childish mistake became one of the most beloved desserts worldwide. And consider anesthesia. Before the mid-1800s, surgery was a nightmare of unbearable pain. But physicians began to notice that people who inhaled ether or nitrous oxide during parties often became numb and even insensitive to pain. What started as recreational laughing gas gatherings accidentally led doctors to realize they could perform surgery without patients suffering agony. From careless experimentation came one of the most important advances in medicine. Even penicillin's story has a twin in something more explosive. Alfred Nobel, while experimenting with nitroglycerin, accidentally discovered that when absorbed by a powdery substance like diatomaceous earth, it became stable and safe to handle. That accident gave birth to dynamite, which was used both in destructive war and in peaceful construction projects that shaped modern cities. The truth is, history shows us that the line between mistake and miracle is thin. Sometimes the greatest breakthroughs happen when people stop fearing accidents and start noticing them. Take Teflon, the material that makes nonstick pans possible. In 1938, a chemist named Roy Plunkett was trying to create a new kind of refrigerant gas. Instead of a gas, he found that his chemical had turned into a solid white powder inside a pressurized canister. At first it looked like a failed experiment, but this material was extremely slippery and resistant to heat. That accident gave the world Teflon, which became essential not just in kitchens but in aerospace and medical technology. Then there is LSD. In 1938, Albert Hofmann was working for a pharmaceutical company studying ergot fungus, hoping to create a stimulant for circulation problems. Years later, while revisiting his old research, he accidentally absorbed a small amount of the compound through his skin. Soon, he experienced intense visual distortions and feelings unlike anything known before. That unplanned event introduced the world to one of the most controversial and studied substances of the 20th century. Even one of the most popular toys in history came from failure. In the 1940s, engineer Richard James was working with tension springs to stabilize naval equipment. One slipped off a shelf, hit the ground, and instead of just collapsing, it kept walking end over end. That accident became the Slinky, a simple toy that has sold hundreds of millions of units and fascinated generations of children. But sometimes discoveries come not from the lab but from everyday life. The story of cornflakes begins in the 1890s with the Kellogg brothers, who accidentally left cooked wheat sitting out for too long. When they tried to roll it out, it broke into flakes instead of dough. Roasting the flakes created a crunchy texture, and with that mistake, breakfast cereal was born. A similar accident gave us one of the most famous soft drinks in the world. In 1886, a pharmacist named John Pemberton was attempting to create a medicinal syrup for headaches and energy. He mixed ingredients including coca leaves and cola nuts, but the result tasted so good that people began drinking it recreationally. Without realizing it, he had created Coca-Cola, a drink that would become a global cultural symbol. Even radioactivity itself was discovered by accident. In 1896, Henri Becquerel was studying minerals that glowed in sunlight. He wrapped photographic plates with black paper, placed uranium salts on top, and left them in a drawer, expecting sunlight to activate them later. To his surprise, the plates developed images even without light. He had accidentally discovered radioactivity, opening the door to nuclear science and medicine. The irony of history is clear: the most valuable treasures often hide inside mistakes, forgotten drawers, ruined experiments, and even children's accidents. Every so-called failure is a reminder that chance can guide humanity to places no plan could ever predict. Let's start with Velcro. In 1941, a Swiss engineer named Georges de Mestral went on a hunting trip with his dog. When he returned home, he noticed burrs sticking stubbornly to his clothes and to the dog's fur. Curious, he studied them under a microscope and saw tiny hooks clinging to loops of fabric. That random hike led him to invent Velcro, now used in everything from shoes to spacesuits. Then there is the pacemaker. In 1956, engineer Wilson Greatbatch was working on building a heart rhythm recording device. By mistake, he installed the wrong type of resistor. Instead of recording a heartbeat, the device emitted electrical pulses. At first it seemed like an error, but soon he realized it could mimic the natural rhythm of a human heart. That accident gave birth to the implantable pacemaker, saving millions of lives. Another shocking story is about insulin. In the early 1920s, Canadian researchers Frederick Banting and Charles Best were trying to study the pancreas in dogs. In the process, they accidentally removed part of the pancreas that produced digestive enzymes but left the section responsible for controlling blood sugar. When the dog survived without developing diabetes, they realized they had stumbled upon the key to regulating blood sugar. That discovery led to insulin therapy, which revolutionized the treatment of diabetes. Even Play-Doh, a toy almost every child has touched, began as a mistake. In the 1930s, it was created as a wallpaper cleaner to remove coal dust from walls. But when the product became less useful after homes switched to cleaner heating methods, teachers discovered it was perfect for children's crafts. What began as a failed cleaning product became one of the most iconic toys in history. Sometimes even space technology comes from chance. In 1964, Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson were testing a large radio antenna. They kept detecting a strange background noise that wouldn't go away, no matter how much they cleaned the equipment or chased away pigeons nesting inside. Eventually, they realized the noise was not a flaw at all, it was the faint echo of the Big Bang itself. By accident, they discovered the cosmic microwave background radiation, a piece of evidence that proved how the universe began. Even chewing gum's popularity can be traced to an accident. Thomas Adams in the 1860s was trying to use chicle, a natural latex, as a substitute for rubber. His experiments with tires and other products failed. On a whim, he flavored the chicle and chewed it. What was once a failed rubber experiment turned into the chewing gum industry. And here is one that feels almost like science fiction. Safety glass, the kind used in car windshields, was discovered in 1903 when a chemist named Edouard Benedictus dropped a glass flask coated with plastic cellulose nitrate. Instead of shattering into dangerous shards, it cracked but held together. That accident saved countless lives and became the basis for modern safety glass. The truth is, if we removed accidental discoveries from history, we would erase so many of the things we take for granted today. Sometimes the most world-changing ideas don't come from years of planning but from a mistake, a curiosity, and someone smart enough to pay attention. Let's begin with stainless steel. In 1913, a British metallurgist named Harry Burley was searching for a way to prevent gun barrels from wearing out. While experimenting with different metal mixtures, he created an alloy containing chromium. To his surprise, the steel didn't rust like ordinary metal. At first it seemed like just another sample, but soon the world realized this error had given us stainless steel, a material now used everywhere from skyscrapers to kitchen utensils. Then there's quinine, the first effective treatment for malaria. Long before scientists understood the disease, legend says South American natives discovered it by accident when someone drank water that had been contaminated by cinchona tree bark. The bitter liquid reduced fevers, and eventually Europeans carried this knowledge worldwide. That chance encounter with tree bark became a medicine that saved countless lives. Bubble wrap too was born from failure. In 1957, two engineers tried to create textured wallpaper by sealing two shower curtains together. The product didn't sell as wallpaper, nor as greenhouse insulation. Only later did they realize its protective qualities for packaging. What started as a strange interior design experiment became one of the most widely used packing materials in the world. Even inkjet printers owe their existence to accident. In the 1970s, a Canon engineer accidentally rested a hot soldering iron on a pen. Moments later, he noticed that the ink inside was ejected forcefully from the tip. That single mistake inspired the mechanism behind inkjet printer technology, changing how people print documents and images. Another striking one is the invention of anesthesia through chloroform. In the mid-1800s, a Scottish doctor named James Simpson invited friends over to experiment with various chemicals, inhaling their vapors to see their effects. One night, they tried chloroform, fell unconscious, and woke up unharmed hours later. Simpson realized this strange accident could be used to perform surgery without agony, transforming medicine forever. Cornell physicists also made history through error. In 1986, while studying superconductors, scientists accidentally used a ceramic material at a higher temperature than anyone thought possible. The material still showed superconductivity, a property scientists believed only occurred near absolute zero. That unexpected discovery opened a new era in physics and technology. And even one of the simplest candies has its roots in accident. Chocolate chip cookies were invented in the 1930s when Ruth Wakefield, owner of the Toll House Inn, ran out of baking chocolate. She broke up pieces of a Nestle chocolate bar and added them to cookie dough, expecting them to melt evenly. Instead, the chunks held their shape, and a legend was born. Again and again, these accidents remind us, chance creates the stage, but human curiosity writes the script. Mistakes that at first look like failures can end up becoming inventions that reshape our lives. Take matches, for instance. In 1826, a British pharmacist named John Walker was stirring chemicals with a wooden stick. When he tried to scrape off the dried residue, the stick suddenly ignited. At first, it was just an odd reaction, but soon it became the basis of the first friction matches. A messy accident in a workshop turned into something people all over the world now carry in their pockets. Another strange story is the invention of artificial rubber. In the early 20th century, scientists were desperately searching for alternatives to natural rubber. In 1930, a chemist at DuPont named Wallace Carothers accidentally created neoprene, the first successful synthetic rubber, while working with acetylene. What began as a byproduct became essential in industries from construction to space exploration. Then there's penicillin's sweet cousin, streptomycin. In 1943, Selman Waxman's team was testing soil microbes for possible antibiotics. A researcher accidentally used the wrong sample and discovered a bacteria that killed tuberculosis germs. That accident produced streptomycin, the first effective cure for tuberculosis, and another milestone in modern medicine. Let's not forget the story of dynamite's cousin, safety matches. The original phosphorus matches were dangerous, often igniting unexpectedly and poisoning workers. But in 1844, a Swedish chemist named Gustav Erik Pask discovered that moving the phosphorus to the striking surface, rather than inside the match itself, made them safe. His work wasn't planned, it was a correction of what looked like a disaster, and it gave us safe matches still used today. Even color sometimes comes from mistake. In 1856, William Perkin was trying to synthesize quinine to treat malaria. Instead, his experiment produced a purple residue. Instead of discarding it, he noticed the color was vivid and lasting. He had accidentally invented the first synthetic dye, mauve, which launched the modern chemical dye industry and even transformed fashion. Potassium bromide, once widely used as a sedative, was discovered in a similar way. Doctors in the 19th century prescribed it for epilepsy almost by accident after noticing its calming effect during unrelated treatments. While medicine has since moved past it, it was once considered a miracle for conditions thought untreatable. Even chips that run your phone today have an accidental ancestor. The discovery of semiconductors came when researchers experimenting with crystal radios noticed that certain materials allowed current to pass in one direction only. At first, this was a frustrating flaw. But that flaw became the foundation of transistors and modern computing. Everywhere you look, medicine, technology, food, even fashion, the fingerprints of chance are there. Humanity often stumbles forward, and what we call progress is very often the story of accidents embraced instead of ignored. Coca-Cola's rival, Pepsi. In the 1890s, a pharmacist named Caleb Bradham wanted to create a health tonic to aid digestion. He mixed sugar, water, caramel, lemon oil, nutmeg, and other ingredients. The formula wasn't what he intended, but customers loved the taste. Instead of medicine, he had stumbled onto a drink that became one of the biggest brands on earth. Then there's the microwave sweet cousin, potato flakes. In the 1950s, a researcher at the USDA left mashed potatoes in a hot drum dryer longer than intended. The result was thin flakes that could be rehydrated instantly. That mistake gave birth to instant mashed potatoes, a product that changed convenience foods forever. Another iconic invention born of error is the popsicle's distant relative, ice cream cones. At the 1904 World's Fair in St. Louis, an ice cream vendor ran out of bowls. A neighboring waffle vendor rolled his waffles into cones to help serve the ice cream. What began as a shortage turned into the global standard for serving frozen desserts. Even one of the greatest scientific breakthroughs, smallpox vaccination, was connected to chance observation. In the late 1700s, Edward Jenner noticed that milkmaids who contracted cowpox, a milder disease, seemed immune to smallpox. By deliberately exposing people to cowpox, he accidentally pioneered the first successful vaccine, saving millions of lives. And think of safety glass's partner, laminated glass. In 1903, French chemist Édouard Benedictus accidentally dropped a glass flask coated with cellulose nitrate. Instead of shattering dangerously, it cracked but held together. That accident became the basis for laminated safety glass, protecting drivers and passengers in automobiles to this day. Another surprise was sticky but life-saving, silly putty. During World War II, researchers were trying to make synthetic rubber. One experiment combining silicone oil with boric acid produced a stretchy, bouncy substance that was useless as rubber but amusing as a toy. By accident, silly putty was born, entertaining generations. Even champagne's sparkling cousin, beer bottles with twist-off caps, came from an unexpected turn. In 1961, William Painter was refining bottle caps when one of his modifications accidentally made it easier to remove and reseal. Instead of discarding the idea, manufacturers adopted it, forever changing how we open drinks. And of course, there's the story of vulcanized rubber's sibling, superball material. In 1965, chemist Norman Stingley was experimenting with synthetic rubber when he created a material that bounced incredibly high. Though useless for industrial purposes, it became the basis of the popular superball toy. The pattern is inescapable: mistakes become marvels, accidents become industries, and chance becomes history. Humanity's greatest genius may simply be noticing when something unexpected appears and asking, what if? And so, this has been Apple from AppleKnows channel, walking you through the strange, almost unbelievable accidents that quietly built our world. From medicines that save millions, to snacks we cannot stop eating, to technologies that power our daily lives, all of it reminds us that not every mistake is a failure. Sometimes chance, curiosity, and a sharp eye combine to change history forever. The next time something doesn't go as planned, remember these stories. You might not just be making an error, you might be standing at the beginning of something extraordinary. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep looking at the unexpected with open eyes.